This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Hey everyone, I'm Simone, and tonight on Signal, the House votes to pass a bill condemning hate sparked by controversial freshman Representative Ilhan Omar. And the Central African Republic is the hardest place in the world to be a child. We meet one group working to change that. And a stalker was arrested inside Taylor Swift's Manhattan townhome. We'll share all the details. But we're starting with breaking news. Paul Manafort was just sentenced to 47 months in prison. That's almost 4 years. The judge said he thinks the guidelines were excessive as Manafort's lived a, quote, otherwise blameless life, but did say he was surprised that Manafort didn't express regret. Now, just a reminder, Manafort was the first person in Trump's orbit to get hit with charges by special counsel Robert Mueller. And over the summer, he was found guilty of 8 fraud-related charges stemming from his consulting work on behalf of Ukraine's Russian-backed ex-president. Now, it's not just Manafort in the hot seat this week. Trump's former attorney and self-described fixer, Michael Cohen, just finished a week of testimony on the Hill, a lot of it behind closed doors where he dropped a trail of breadcrumbs for congressional investigators. And that got us thinking. There are a lot of inquiries into the president's campaign, businesses, finances, just too many to keep track of, really. So we asked our friend Tom Winter from the NBC News Investigative Unit to break down who's investigating the president.
For over 2 years now, we've heard about nonstop investigations either involving the president directly, his campaign, Russia, tax fraud, campaign finance fraud. We've heard about a special counsel, which is something that we very rarely have and happen in this country. Going back to before President Trump was even elected, the idea that the Russians were starting to interfere or were actually interfering in the 2016 election started to become known. After James Comey was fired, certain people that were in the Justice Department, including the Attorney General at the time, had connections to either the Trump campaign, to Russia, or both. And so it was decided in a very rare decision to have a special counsel appointed. And that's Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller's had a very specific focus, and it's to look into not only the Russian interference effort in 2016, but whether or not there was any sort of connection at all to the Trump campaign or to the president himself. One of the things that Robert Mueller has focused on as it relates to Russia is not only the possible links to the Russian government and President Trump, but also some of the things that people in his orbit have said about it, including his former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty this past November to lying to Congress about an effort to build a hotel or a condominium in Moscow. The third kind of prong of this that has raised a lot of questions is Trump's campaign chairman at the critical juncture of the summer of 2016 during the election. And that's Paul Manafort, and that's also under Robert Mueller. The money that he was able to take in from a pro-Russian candidate in Ukraine, his business ties abroad, all sorts of bank and tax fraud that Paul Manafort has pleaded guilty to. And Paul Manafort is going to be going to jail for this. And several investigations actually spawned out of Robert Mueller's case. And since they weren't specific to his focus, they ended up going to other prosecutorial offices, including federal prosecutors here in New York City. They're in the Southern District of New York is what it's called. One of the things they've been looking at is campaign finance violations and the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. In April of 2018, one of the biggest headlines to come out of all the investigations involving the president is that his attorney had been searched. One of the reasons that we know that they were looking into that is these campaign finance violations that have to do with hush money payments to 2 women who have alleged affairs with the president, affairs that the White House and the president has strongly denied. But this was a key focus of prosecutors in New York. And now we have 2 new fronts: individuals in the Trump organization and the Trump inaugural. Both of those things are being looked at by federal prosecutors in New York. Now, to make it just a little bit more complicated, we also can add state and local investigations. And since a lot of this happened in Manhattan, the Manhattan District Attorney, led by Cy Vance, is also looking into some of these charges. In addition to that, we have the New York State Attorney General, because they have some aspects of this to look into, too. So one of the things that they've already taken a look at is the Trump Organization. They're also going to take a look at Paul Manafort, and they're also going to take a look at Michael Cohen. In addition to all of this, we have congressional investigations. being led in the House as well as the Senate. There's various committees within the House and Senate who have oversight of the Russian election interference and the president's interactions from a law enforcement standpoint, as well as campaign finance violations and some of the other things that we've discussed today. The reports that we're going to see first are from Special Counsel Robert Mueller and any future indictments from the Southern District of New York. At that point, Congress will have a really good sense of not only where to look, but whether or not there's something that may add up to impeachment. This has been an unprecedented time in U.S. history. Have special counsel, both chambers of Congress, local investigations, federal investigations outside of the special counsel, all surrounding this president, this administration, and some of his now former closest advisors.
Great breakdown of a really complex topic there. Okay, half a world away, the landlocked Central African Republic has become the center of an epic humanitarian crisis that has largely gone unnoticed. This brutal civil war between Christian and Muslim militias has made it the most dangerous place on earth to be a child. NBC's Cynthia McFadden traveled to the country's capital, Bangui, to meet one group working to change that.
Why is there joy in the streets in a country teetering on the verge of famine? The answer is the Boy Scouts of the Central African Republic.
It's dangerous work you do.
Yes.
Where do you find the courage?
We know it's danger, but we try to do it.
Except for a war zone, this is as dangerous as the assignment gets.
Yes.
Carol Stern is the CEO of UNICEF USA. She says the Scouts are one of the few things holding this country together. For the past 6 years, 14 armed groups keep the people here in a constant state of fear.
This is the most dangerous place in the world for children.
Harder than Syria?
The most dangerous because the conflict and the violence here prevent supplies from getting through. There is an alarming rate of malnutrition in the country as a result. 2 of every 3 children in this country are in need of humanitarian assistance right now.
She invited us to go with her to meet some of the children she and her colleagues are desperately trying to save. The going is tough. In the last year, there have been nearly 400 attacks on aid workers, as the bullet hole in our armed vehicle reminds us.
Families are afraid to go out of their homes. Families are afraid to go to church. They're afraid to send a child to school.
But this is where the Boy Scouts come in, because Scouts do what the government can't or won't do. They are the arms and legs, perhaps more accurately, the heart of the battle to save lives and rebuild this country.
You all take on very dangerous assignments. You went into the Ebola zone, helping do survey and help the doctors.
We must do our best to change the future.
When the Pope visited here a few years ago, they helped with crowd control. They often partner with UNICEF, putting their own lives at risk. When locals were skeptical about a UNICEF vaccine program, the Scouts went door to door, urging trust.
And they are proud to wear that uniform, to be part of building a better country.
She says if this nation has any hope of surviving, it will happen with their help. There are more than 12,000 Scouts here, nearly equal to the number of UN peacekeepers, also trying to hold this country together. These young men and a few women have never known a country at peace. Even as the bloody civil war between Christians and Muslims rages around them, the Scouts say religion is not the problem.
Reason why there is a Christian, Muslim, I'm Christian, he's Muslim.
Forgot.
We are all Central African peoples. We are the same blood.
They're blunt when it comes to who is to blame.
It's about our leaders. They don't think about the population. We suffer here, but they live in the good situation.
So they are literally taking matters into their own hands, traveling around the country, teaching others.
I explain the importance to watch the end before to eat something.
Do you know that the least expensive, most effective intervention in lowering the number of children who die before the age of 5 is washing hands?
And in a country filled with so much desperation and lost hope, these Scouts truly believe the future is in these very hands.
Bravo.
and then we can touch all Central African Republic.
You're an optimist.
Yes, you are optimist.
Living the oath known the world over to help other people at all times.
Powerful story. Well, if you want to help the children of the Central African Republic, you can donate to UNICEF. They're the ones there on the ground, as you can see, helping people out who are affected by the ongoing crisis. And get this, since Cynthia McFadden's report aired on NBC News yesterday morning, UNICEF has raised $1 million. Okay, one of Trump's first moves as president, that so-called travel ban for people coming from a bunch of Muslim-majority nations. The Supreme Court ruled the president actually did have the authority to stop people from entering the country. And since the ban started, the U.S. has rejected more than 37,000 people applying for visas. Alexa Lioto met up with one family affected by Trump's travel ban. Half arrived from Syria before the law, and half stuck en route.
We came here 2 years ago, in 2016. We came here on election day.
The Syrians cannot be allowed to come in, folks. We don't know who the hell they are. We don't know who they are.
We was scared, nervous a little bit, worried this will be the president. It was a hard decision to come here without my mother. But
it's been 2 years since President Trump first introduced the travel ban, and 6 months since it was permanently upheld by the Supreme Court. We're just now starting to better understand the effects of how it's being implemented. Like, what happens to families that were separated? Families like Issa and Amina's, half of whom made it into the U.S. before the ban was announced, and half who weren't as lucky, and are still waiting in Jordan. Is there anything at all they can do?
How are you? Good?
This Faisal also, when he baby in Syria.
Oh my God.
We came to U.S. because we thought it's more safe, good future for the kids, good education. It was very scared there, not safe.
You haven't seen some of your family in over 2 years.
Yeah.
Who is still in Jordan?
Still in Jordan, my mom and one sister, one brother, they are single. And other brother, he has 6 kids. They have cases to come here. They have many interviews we did. And they just wait.
When you left for the U.S., did you think that you would end up being separated from your mother and other members of your family for over 2 years now?
No. We thought it's like a few months they will come.
When the government defended its latest version of the ban in front of the Supreme Court, they argued the ban included a waiver, which would allow people from banned countries to receive visas in compelling cases. The hope for the administration was to prove that the ban wasn't outright discrimination against Muslims. And in theory, the criteria for the waiver is pretty generous, like having close relatives in the U.S., facing undue hardship, or even having business ties. But in practice, lawyers and refugee resettlement experts say the process is opaque, confusing, and rarely actually being implemented.
Well, we've seen almost nobody come through the waiver system. It was a joke, it's a sham, just not being implemented, and people's lives are suffering as a result.
On February 26th, the State Department released new information on how many people from banned countries were actually being granted waivers. A spokesperson told me that 2,673 applicants had been cleared for a waiver by the end of January 2019. But at the same time, the U.S. rejected more than 37,000 people from banned countries. So the Trump administration is getting sued for the waivers in a case called Imami versus Nielsen.
The government is saying that they are making these waiver determinations at the interview or based on a conversation with the applicant. If you've had your interview well before the proclamation went into effect, it means that you haven't had any chance at all to express to the consular official that you have a certain hardship that should be taken into account. What the Imami versus Nielsen case does is it challenges the government's failure to enact a good faith waiver process that people can actually access.
In September, the administration tried to get the class action suit thrown out by arguing that the court didn't have authority over individual waiver decisions and that the plaintiffs didn't have enough standing to bring equal protection and due process claims. The State Department reaffirmed to me that there was a process through which consular officials reviewed cases to determine eligibility. But in early February, a U.S. District Court judge rejected the government's bid, referencing a former consular officer, saying, quote, "There really is no waiver."
Even if you take the government's words at face value that a consular official is making this decision based on the criteria, they don't actually have the information they might need to make that decision. Like, they're going to look at a visa application that's only about the bona fides of your relationship with your spouse, for example, and then somehow magically be able to discern whether you have a particular hardship.
That's the case for Issa's family. His mother is sick, and they have close relatives in the U.S. And as refugees, they do face undue hardship. But because they did their interviews back in 2014, lawyers say they have very few avenues to demonstrate eligibility for the new criteria for a waiver announced in 2017.
هي كيس ذا سكرين.
والله تعبانة حيل.
رحتي على الدكتور؟ رحتي على الدكتور؟
A situation like this, where there's a family member who's really ailing and who's separated from their entire family, that should be a classic case where a waiver should be granted.
But like thousands of other families, it's a waiting game for Issa and Amina, clinging to memories as the hope begins to fade.
And here are some of today's headlines briefly. The House just passed a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred, which is all happening because of those controversial comments made by Ilhan Omar. That's the freshman congresswoman from Minnesota. Democratic leadership hopes that voting on this resolution will help put the issue to rest. Now, you might recall Omar's comments. She suggested American supporters of Israel have allegiance to a foreign country. And it led to this sharp split among Democrats in the House because some saw it as hypocritical to call out Omar when less was being done about worse comments made by Republicans. And then others wanted the resolution to single out anti-Semitism on its own, while still some other people thought it was important to condemn religious discrimination of all kinds, including against Muslims. Now, it's worth noting that Omar, one of the first two Muslim women elected to Congress, has been the subject of a recent death threat herself. And we're hearing from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar on this resolution for the first time. So here's what she said in a joint statement with Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and Andre Carson. They wrote, quote, "We are tremendously proud to be a part of a body that has put forth a condemnation of all forms of bigotry, including anti-Semitism, racism, and white supremacy." Okay, Senator Martha McSally of Arizona, who's a retired Air Force colonel and the first female fighter pilot to fly a combat mission, revealed yesterday that she was raped by a senior officer while she was in the Air Force.
Like you, I am also a military sexual assault survivor. During my 26 years in uniform, I witnessed so many weaknesses in the processes involving sexual assault prevention. It motivated me to make recommendations to Air Force leaders. It shaped my approach to command as a commander, and it informed my advocacy for change.
The Air Force responded, saying in a statement, quote, "We are appalled and deeply sorry for what Senator McSally experienced, and we stand behind her and all victims of sexual assault." Then they continued by saying, "We are steadfast in our commitment to eliminate this reprehensible behavior and breach of trust in our ranks." Just for some context, back in 2017, that's the most recent year that these stats are available, the DoD says they received more than 6,700 reports of sexual assault. About 4,000 of those reports were from women. And data from 2014 shows 52% of women said they faced retaliation for reporting assaults. Okay, a guy from Florida allegedly broke into Taylor Swift's Manhattan home in the middle of the night last night, and he's now in custody here in New York. The NYPD says the man climbed a ladder to the second-floor window of Swift's house, then used a brick to break through that window. But the house is being renovated, so no one was home at the time. Still, the alarm went off, police showed up, and get this, the man just got out of jail in February for breaking into Swift's house last April, which he pled guilty to. And talk about timing. Just yesterday, Swift wrote a piece for Elle magazine where she talked about this exact thing. Here's what she said, quote, "You can't get enough stalkers trying to break into your house, and you kind of start prepping for bad things. We have to live bravely in order to truly feel alive, and that means not being ruled by our greatest fears." At the beginning there, she was saying, you get enough of these stalkers. All right, Instagram has a new queen, and it's the queen. The royal family's Instagram account has been around for a while, of course, and has 4.6 million followers, but today was the first time the Queen herself actually threw up her first gram. Queen Elizabeth posted a picture of a letter written to her great-great-grandfather, Prince Albert, in 1842 by a man named Charles Babbage, who she called the world's first computer pioneer in the caption. Now, this was all done to celebrate a new exhibit at the UK's Science Museum. So, does it really count? I guess so. And those are your headlines briefly. We'll be right back in 30 seconds.
We are going to start with something different tonight. This is one of those things that you have not been otherwise hearing about in the news, but stick with me.
Feed your mind with fresh perspective. Get your favorite MSNBC shows now as podcasts.
The topics we cover on MSNBC every day, they're driven by big ideas, big themes, huge societal changes. And that's what we talk about on our new podcast. It's called Why Is This Happening?
Why Is This Happening with Chris Hayes. New episodes every Tuesday.
So yesterday, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren, aka 4 of the 6 Democratic senators running for president, co-sponsored legislation aiming to make public college debt-free. Bernie Sanders, however, was not among the initial co-sponsors of this bill, but he's got his own legislation to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. Now, Amy Klobuchar, who's politically more moderate than these other candidates, hasn't endorsed either of these bills. But we'll be watching to see what these and the rest of the contenders say, because the issue of student debt in this country is not going away. And in fact, it's getting worse. Ali Velshi has more.
In recent years, millennials have run up some serious debt. If you're part of that generation, this may not be breaking news to you. A new report from the New York Federal Reserve says Americans aged 19 to 29 have now accumulated a little more than $1 trillion in outstanding debt. Now, the last time we saw a number that high was back in 2007, when the financial crisis was about to hit. Student loans play a huge role here, surpassing all mortgage, auto, and credit card debt that millennials are running up. Even when you look across all age groups, student loan debt has grown at the fastest rate over the last 10 years compared to other debt. Over 44 million Americans now have an average student loan balance of more than $32,000. The amount of student debt is ballooning because young Americans seriously value higher education. They see a college degree as an even more important milestone than getting married or landing a full-time job. Let's be clear about one thing, though. Debt isn't necessarily a bad thing if you can actually pay it off. Right now, just over 11% of all outstanding student debt is delinquent, meaning a payment hasn't been made in over 90 days. That's almost double the delinquency rate before the last recession. We want that number to be lower because it suggests that people are actually keeping up with their loan payments. With all of these dire-looking numbers and the rising cost of tuition, sometimes you can't help wondering if college is worth running up all that debt. That's probably a debate for another time. Either way, chew on this. Studies show that people who have college degrees continue to earn more money than people who don't.
Thanks, Ali. Well, International Women's Day is tomorrow, and there's some big news for women who work in the airline industry. That's what we're going to talk about right now. Here it is. Virgin Atlantic is allowing its female flight attendants to have a bit more say in what they wear. The company has dropped a requirement that they wear makeup, joining United, JetBlue, and Delta, which have already eased their makeup requirements. And ahead of tomorrow's holiday, it's interesting to think about the fact that, on average, women spend nearly an hour every day on their appearance. And according to Forbes, the beauty industry generates $4.5 billion in revenue annually. So all this got me wondering, why?
We wear makeup
to shape the way other people perceive us.
Women conceal, we highlight, we contour, without ever really asking why. Society tells us we need makeup to look and feel complete. Is that sexist?
Women as a whole are expected to conform to these cultural assumptions and gender stereotypes. So it doesn't really matter whether you're in a law firm or whether you're at Starbucks. The most attractive perceptions are the ones that benefit.
In my quest to better understand what this dynamic looks like for women today, I decided to check out She Spoke. It's a spot here in New York where you can get your makeup done in the same way you go to the salon for a blowout. That's Jo Becker. She's a regular here. Why do you like getting your makeup professionally done?
Having my makeup done just sort of makes me feel empowered, like you sort of have this shield and that nothing can kind of penetrate that.
So it kind of feels like armor to you, like you're suiting up for battle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Rebecca and I never started this place so that women could come in and be pretty for men, so that women could come in and feel good about themselves.
Over the course of our lifetimes, women spend about $200,000 on our appearance. So why is makeup a big deal? Well, because when we look at spending month to month, women shell out nearly $91 on cosmetics alone. But men? A mere $51 goes towards their faces. And then there's the most precious resource, time.
The time it takes for women to apply makeup in the morning, to do their hair, is labor that they're performing that males don't have to.
Before World War I, most women didn't wear makeup. Once men left for the war, all that changed.
Because women are entering the workforce, they have this new power with respect to purchasing products, and they become the primary target.
The research community agrees. Women who wear some makeup are more likely to get the job and make more money, even if the time and cost of beauty disadvantages them. But some studies show female bosses actually weaken their authority when they wear heavy makeup.
We really need to shift our gaze and start focusing so that we're not disadvantaging women, whether they're wearing makeup or not.
Maybe you like wearing makeup. Maybe you feel like you need to. But if you can't see yourself without it, it's worth it to ask why. If you're a loyal viewer of The Bachelor, well, this is awkward. It's my guilty pleasure, okay? Everyone needs one. Don't worry, we're not going to spoil the ending for you, and if you're not exactly caught up or don't ever plan to be, that's cool too. But this is how it works, right? So every season, millions of viewers tune in as 30 women compete to win over one man's heart with the promise of a ring at the end. But as you can imagine, the show rarely produces long-lasting engagement, relationships, or marriages. So what is it that keeps us watching? Or what is it that keeps these contenders coming back season after season? Well, we checked in with couples psychologist Aaron Asquith to help us understand the psychology behind The Bachelor.
Outside of those walls, would they still choose that partner? Who knows? The fantasy is all fabricated, truthfully. There are these extravagant dates that they go on. Fireworks are going off with a woman's first kiss. These are things that we dream about, that we fantasize about having from romance movies, that we're taught from even prince and princess books that we read when we're younger. So it aids in the falling in love process. Adrenaline happens from these very intense dates that they go, such as bungee jumping. What this does for the characters is they start to overcome fears together, which then again helps them narrate to say, this is the only person that could overcome this fear with me. So they're feeding off of these different hormonal responses and chemical responses in their body from the adrenaline rush that connects us again with that person that we worked through this with, that we experienced this with. And the producers and show know what some of these contestants are fearful of. So they utilize it in a way that creates this bonding experience between the characters and between Bachelor or Bachelorette. In a long-term relationship, as they're dating over time, we slowly start to share parts of ourselves, the good and the ones that we may view not as beautiful, basically, or the more traumatic stories of our lives. And so what it asks of these contestants is to share them very quickly so that they can immediately get to know each other. Again, it's a condensed time frame of 2 months. So we're immediately having to test that this person, this bachelor or bachelorette, is going to really love us for all our parts. Is it healthy so quickly? No, because they honestly could re-traumatize themselves by disclosing or feeling the pressure to disclose this information so quickly. It's a competition. There's one person that we're all supposed to fall in love with. And what we know about the scarcity model is because there's one person, we all feel that we then desire that person. In the outside dating world, there's so many people that we swipe away that we lose interest very quickly. Here, we hold our interest because there's only one choice for us. Outside of those walls, would they still choose that partner? Who knows?
I definitely can't wait to talk to you more inside.
Sounds great.
Part of the reason people tune in is for the drama that transpires between all of the personalities and dynamics that happen between the characters that are chosen. They also serve a purpose for the bachelor or bachelorette so that they can figure out what they truly want in a partner. Maybe I'm super extroverted. I think I want somebody introverted, so I'm intrigued by that person. Then I realize that's not the right person for me. So in order to start to figure out what you want in a partner, you have to date multiple characters or different personality types to fine-tune what truly matches your needs. And we all love love, and we like to watch love happen. We all also want to believe that love can occur in this very fantasy world. Dating is so hard right now. It gives people hope that they can date in this manner, that they can still find love, that it's out there. You're watching these couples' love story unravel through the TV. You become a part of it. This is what becomes the addictive quality, the adrenaline rush, season after season.
I feel like I know myself so much better now. Well, that's our show for tonight, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.